Since 2019, it's been law that the Emerald City is a safe place for all to call home, a sanctuary city.
The workers and the economic benefits of this city are enriched by the immigrant and refugee communities.
Now, Seattle may be at risk of losing hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding because of immigration enforcement.
It's not inappropriate that the federal government say, look, if you're not going to honor our detainers, we're not going to honor financial support to you.
The federal debate over sanctuary cities heats up.
Thank you for joining us for this town hall. I'm Steve Soliz of KOMO News and CW Arc Seattle. Tonight we are talking about sanctuary cities. It is a hot topic right now across the country. And so we thought it'd be good to bring people in who are closely tied to the law in some capacity to talk about how it impacts us here, how we got here, where we are now, and where we go next. So joining us tonight, we'll start with the Sheriff of Adams County, Dale Wagner. Thanks for being with us. Also, Representative Jim Walsh, who is also the state GOP chairman, and Senator Lisa Wellman, who actually is the sponsor of the Keep Washington Working bill. Thank you all three for being with us today.
Thank you for bringing the topic forward. And by the way, this was not a city law, it was the state law.
Absolutely. And so we want to jump into how we got here. So let's go all the way back. If we can, I just want to go back to 2017. We'll go back to the Executive Order 1701 from Jay Inslee, the reaffirming Washington's commitment to tolerance and diversity and inclusiveness, which essentially kind of kicked things off. And the idea there was for the state to be inclusive and tolerant, compassionate for all residents, regardless of citizenship status. But I want to ask you, Lisa Wellman, tell us a little bit more about how the Keep Washington Working Act came to be.
Well, when I was running for office, this was the first time I've ever run for any office. My headquarters were in the office of an immigration lawyer, as it turned out. And so I had a constant stream of people coming in to speak to this lawyer about things that were concerning them. And through Carol Brown, the lawyer, I was introduced to One Washington, an organization that is very supportive of especially the Latino community, and heard a lot of stories, and in fact was just primed to hear. So I was, kind of listening for stories about what was happening with the new administration. And a couple of things that came up, one was that I was hearing stories about people who saw crimes being committed and were afraid to call the police. And that was of concern. And I also was listening to what was happening in other states and was very attuned to the idea of what had happened in Georgia, where they really had a hard cram down and wound up with essentially losing the peach crop. And so the economic impact was immediately on my mind as well. And so I started to look into what was happening. And what I felt was that if people aren't calling the police because they're afraid of what might happen to someone in their family or to themselves, then we're all not as safe as we could be, because the police can't do their job if they're not being called. Their job is to keep Washingtonians safe. And so that spurred the concept of looking into and talking to lots of people and looking into the bill and what might happen. As you know, we're a strong agricultural state. That's huge. And I know that we rely on migrant workers, et cetera. And so I had to learn a lot about a lot of different areas where we have populations coming in from other countries. Of course, as a New Yorker, I'm very used to, the Statue of Liberty and being used to, quite a diverse population. Was interesting to find that Washington State, most people won't necessarily know it, has such an incredibly diverse population. In my local school district, I have over 100 languages. So we're seeing a lot of diversity, and especially given our tech market also, I was concerned about how we might be impacted economically, frankly.
So I do want to read just a brief summary of the act, which is posted on the website of the State Attorney General. And it reads, KWW is a law passed by the Washington State Legislature in 2019 that establishes a statewide policy supporting Washington State's economy and immigrants' role in the workplace. In passing KWW, the legislature determined that it is not state or local law enforcement's primary purpose to enforce civil federal immigration law. Additionally, the legislature determined that a person's immigration status, presence in the country, or employment alone is not a matter for police action, reinforcing that the federal government bears a primary jurisdiction to enforce federal immigration law. Importantly, KWW places no restriction on local agencies' ability to enforce state and local law. Senator Wellman, do you think that the way the law has been enacted, that the intent has been made?
So far as I know, one of the things that was required by how the law went out there was for the lieutenant governor, not the lieutenant governor, I'm sorry, the attorney general, who at the time was Attorney General Ferguson, to create information for all of Washington's agencies about how they can and should act regarding immigration. Do your job, do everything regarding your job, but your job is not to do various things with regard to immigration. It was also to make sure that, we have so many people coming from other countries here, especially in our tech industry, that their spouses often came in with all kinds of degrees. And we wanted to also make sure that we could find a way to enable us to use their talents as well, if possible. So it had a number of different elements to it.
Representative Walsh, this was, I'm guessing you voted on this bill. This was 2019. Talk about the impact that this has had, the law has had on our state.
Oh, it's a terrible bill, and it's a disastrous implementation. Listen, there's a lot of word soup going on here. Let's speak plainly. We are a nation of laws, and we have federal immigration law that defines the right, lawful way that immigrants can come into the United States and into Washington State. When someone does not follow the law, when someone breaks the law to come into the United States or Washington State, they are not a lawful immigrant. They are an illegal alien. And an illegal alien is already breaking law, not a civil infraction, mind you, but federal law, to come into the United States in contravention of our immigration law and policy. There's a lot of fiddling around with words on this issue. Migrant, refugee, immigrant. What we need to be clear about is these are different categories of individuals. When a person immigrates to the United States legally and comes to Washington to work in the tech industry, if they follow the law, they have no problem being here and integrating well with our economy. When they sneak across the border illegally, they are breaking the law to come here, and they are not migrants or immigrants or refugees. They are illegal aliens. And the way that Keep Washington Working has been interpreted by that mumbo jumbo you just quoted from the State Attorney General's website is it's turned into a soup of non-compliance with federal law. Now, the issue of sanctuary cities has a lot more to do than just with this one bad state law. It has a lot to do with a series of bad executive orders, one of which you've cited from a few years ago from the governor, but others that followed, as well as some really harebrained local ordinances which have been put into effect in individual cities. So it's more than just one section of the Revised Code of Washington of state law that's in question here. It's a number of different policy points. The net effect is to create confusion among law enforcement agencies about when and how they can cooperate with federal law enforcement agencies, particularly the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, ICE, And the main mechanism of their cooperation, or should be cooperation, is the acceptance of things called immigration detainers. These are essentially search warrants or arrest warrants issued by ICE that we ask local law enforcement to honor the detainer, the warrant, in holding illegal aliens in custody until ICE agents can come collect the illegal alien and deport that person or otherwise adjudicate that person under federal law. We want to make sure that our local law enforcement agencies here in Washington are free to help ICE to cooperate with federal authorities and enforce the law. We're a nation of laws, and when we disregard our laws, we create anarchy and chaos, and we have too much of that.
Well, I have to jump in here now, and when I hear somebody talking about the law that way, number one, if only I would say, when I know that a couple of months ago, a top executive at Microsoft was picked up while jogging in Bellevue, his home community, because he was running as a person of color in his jogging outfit. Of course, he didn't have a license or a passport with him to prove it at a time, and it took 5 days to get him out of a holding tank. So it's not like we're seeing people picked up who are illegal aliens. He was here perfectly legally, number one. And number two, with all the people who are being rounded up today, accused of being not just here illegally, but accused of being gang members, etc. Since habeas corpus, part of the Constitution, the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, I think it's the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, has gone out the window, we have no way of knowing whether anybody who's being picked up is actually an illegal alien, a criminal doing terrible things in America. So
Senator Wellman knows well that an illegal alien driving drunk on an interstate north of Seattle killed State Trooper Christopher Gadd. That person is the kind of person we need to honor detainers about and move out of the country, out of Washington, before that illegal alien or other people like him kill state troopers like Chris Gadd.
And I'm very familiar with that particular case. And how would the police have known ahead of time that that person was somebody they were supposed to prevent from being in the United States? Only if we go around to each and every person and say, show me your papers. Show me your citizenship papers. They did not know, nor did ICE know until the person was arrested having killed this officer. Nobody knew that he had overstayed he had come legally and then overstayed, and so was out of compliance with his visa. That was the individual.
And now, that is the individual we need to make sure that we
the federal government is the only person who
from the United States, Senator Wellman. We can swap story for story. And there are horrible stories like the one of this person killing Chris Gadd that are the reason that the people in this state want to see the law enforced. And however well-meaning Keep Washington Working was, it is being interpreted and used in a way that is allowing lawlessness to reign and our immigration law to not be honored. We need to honor our law. We need to honor immigration detainers and make sure that our immigration law is properly enforced.
We were talking a little bit there about that one Microsoft executive being rounded up. The reality is, in the current climate that we're at politically, that the enforcement ramp up is where it's at now in 2025. Who knows what it'll be like in 2026, 27, so on and so forth. But at this point, the Keep Washington Working Act is the law of the land until some other law does come to play here.
This bill wasn't here's a bill, let's run it, let's pass it. It was 3 years working that bill. And I was working very closely with the sheriffs and police chiefs. It took 3 years to get them to neutral on it, to get all the pieces in place where they said, yes, we support this bill. When I say, yes, they support this bill, They're not going to be out there putting their name on it as sponsors of the bill. They're not. I don't want to misinterpret what they conveyed, but they said this is good to go. We're okay with this bill. And especially important to me, at the beginning of this last session with a new election and the new government in Washington, to have James McMahon, who represents the sheriffs and police chiefs, come to me and say, we stick by our word. And they were very supportive of some of the things that are happening. You know, I didn't realize, for instance, that when I'm pulled over I ran a red light or something. I've never run a red light, but had I run a red light and I was pulled over by the police and they asked to see your license and they go back, I didn't realize that they check on a database to see if there are any criminal warrants out for your arrest. I was informed that, you know, one of the things that is happening now is that I'm not sure who at the federal level has countenanced this or done this, but a number of literally hundreds of thousands of warrants have been dumped in. They're not criminal warrants, but they look like a criminal warrant. And I was told, in fact, that the local sheriffs and police were given instructions in here, you might see this warrant. This is not a reason to pick up anybody. This is not, this is a civil, it is maybe looking like a criminal warrant, but it is not. And if you are in doubt, please call into your superior and have them check it for you. And that's the kind of thing that is happening. The other kind of thing, just not in our state, but in another state, a friend of mine driving through Texas on the way home from doing some work down in New Orleans was stopped 5 times by ICE. A white woman, she said, I had a great tan. It's true, I was very dark. Stopped 5 times by ICE and investigated and then sent on her way. That's the kind of thing that's happening in our country. And it's terrifying. I think it's terrifying to everyone.
It's important that what Senator Wellman said initially is right. Law enforcement was neutral on Keep Washington Working. They did not support it. And, you know, good work for you, Senator Wellman, to get them to neutral, but neutral is not support. Most of the law enforcement community—
it's not opposed either.
Let's shift our focus now to talk about the cost of this act, because clearly we can talk all day about the humanity of what the state is trying to do versus what is happening, but there's going to be a cost, a financial cost. And let me ask you, Senator Wellman, as this bill was drafted, I mean, in 2019, this is when this bill became a law. But in 2017, after Governor Inslee's executive order, not too long after that, at the time, Attorney General Jeff Sessions had listed Seattle on a list of places that shouldn't receive funding for justice, for the federal justice grant that they typically depend on to fund for law enforcement. Our region was at risk of losing that. Was that taken into account, that the potential of loss of federal funds should we move forward with this bill?
Yes, and I think I don't recall the exact verbiage because I'm not a lawyer, but that's even part of the bill in terms of what would happen if we were to lose federal funds because of the bill. I will tell you, let's put it on the record, that of the 51 entities, one of them being the District of Columbia, of the 51 entities in the United States that receive federal funding in terms of how much you put in and how much you get back, you want to guess where Washington is in that list as those who give the most and get the least back? We're number 50. California puts more in and gets less back than any other state. We're right next to them in line. So we're already not getting a lot of the funding that other states are getting for whatever reason. I'm just putting that out there. The other thing that, that I think is important is that, and I think probably we would all agree, that we really don't have very good immigration laws in general. We need a whole lot of other looking at what's going on and how we can keep our state thriving while recognizing the contribution that is made by our immigrant population. It really is evident if you look at the sponsors, those who sponsored this bill, 120 organizations, the entire every aspect of agriculture, of course, the tree fruit growers, the vineyard growers, so many of them, as well as social service organizations, just felt that this bill would serve a good purpose. And so I think, again, it is to make sure that keep Washington working, keep Washington safe, and keep understanding. One of the things that I learned, for instance, about DACA, we talk about DACA, and we've been pretty supportive as a country about DACA, but what about all the kids that are here not DACA? In other words, you're here because your parents were here on visas. You came over at 2 and 3 years of age, and your parents are still here. They're working, but you're not here legally anymore. What happens when you're 21? Are you sent back to a country you've never lived in? I mean, I'm not making any statements, Republican, Democrat. I think those are the kinds of things that we have to address.
Representative Walsh, I mean, you're in Olympia when we have these conversations about funding and where the state stands. We know that the state's not in a good position financially at this point with our budget, but I would imagine that this comes to play when we're talking about money in the state.
Oh, sure. I mean, you don't make policy, or at least you shouldn't, with an eye on, whether the federal government's going to make grants or not make grants. This is about enforcing the law in an orderly and common sense way, and not countermanding or sneaking around or making holes in the law. So, what we need to do is do the right thing that assures that our existing channels to legal immigration into this country and into the state are honored and not disregarded with a kind of cavalier, unserious attitude about how we treat immigration law. I disagree with the senator. She's wrong. Our federal immigration law is fine. We just don't follow it properly. We need to allow for the distinction between someone who comes here under a valid visa, and we have agricultural work visas, we have tech industry work visas, special visas that are made to make immigrating to do those kinds of work easier. And we need to honor those processes and not shrug our shoulders and turn a blind eye to people who break the law to come into the United States and into Washington. If we honor the process, if we honor the law, if we support and enforce the law fairly, not in a discriminatory way, but in a fair and just way, we will encourage lawful immigration. That's what we all want. And not shrug our shoulders and turn a blind eye to criminals who disregard the law. And a person who will break one law is more inclined to break other laws. And sure, not every illegal alien is a gangbanger, but some of them are. And to pretend that's not so is foolish.
I am saying that the federal government has people that they not only pay, but they actually have quotas to round up X number of people, and it's their job. And I'm not hindering their job. I'm just saying it is not our responsibility to turn away from the job of managing the things that we're supposed to be managing. Let them do their job. We're not supposed to run in and stop ICE from doing whatever ICE is doing. I think terrifying people.
That's Antifa's job, right?
Let's not go there.
They're blocking access and egress from federal office buildings.
Well, I'm not saying you're labeling Antifa as though there's something that I know about, and I don't know anything about who is doing it.
Of course you don't.
I know it is terrifying. It is terrifying to have masked men without any sign. When our police officers come to us, they have a badge, they have a number, they have a name. We know who they are. We know that they are actually police officers. And I'm very happy that they're where they are and doing what they're supposed to be doing. The idea that you can have 3 or 4 people come and just round up somebody with no obviously no warrant necessary, and take them away. No habeas corpus. They can be sent to another country. And even the stuff we could start talking about, the GEO group and the quotas that they have from ICE to put people in beds so that they get their money. And they move people around from state to state to fill those beds. I mean, this is crazy nonsense. And it's certainly not the America that I want to see.
I do think
the
we have
courts
to be
have been
honest
pretty
about.
clear. The senator knows the courts have been pretty clear about distinguishing what due process means, and yes, what habeas corpus means in the context of immigration enforcement. And the courts have said, even very recently, federal courts, that there are fact sets in which an illegal alien can be deported with what they call expedited process. Now, I mean, we can go back and forth on the fine points of that, but that is the current law in this country. And so, we can talk about whether we want to change that law, but that is the way the law is
until the amendment in the Constitution is changed. I believe habeas corpus is required. Habeas corpus stands for anybody in this country. Anybody has the right to.
Let's pull this back though, because while you're both having a very important conversation, let's go back to the fact that we're talking about sanctuary cities, the fact that Washington is in fact a sanctuary state. We're talking here with habeas corpus, due process, and the current enforcement of federal law. That's a decision by the Trump administration, and how they're trying to hit quotas or whatever you want to say. That is something that is in the moment in terms of politically. What's going to be a long-lasting impact here in Washington State, because it is the law, is this Keep Washington Working Act. And I'd like to talk to you, knowing that it's just us now. We talked a little bit about the cost, how we got here. Where do we go from here? And Senator Wilmot, I have to ask you, you believe this law is doing good stuff for the state of Washington?
I do.
And you would do it all over again?
Absolutely. I think that it's very important. First of all, the idea that we want to be, or think that we should be, a country where a police officer's job is to go up to each and every citizen that they see to make sure that they have papers with them that justify their being walking the streets of America, that they're being here. That is a country I can't even contemplate everybody thinking is a great idea. The thought that that's who we are is so anathema to my thinking. So I want to make clear, I'm not in any way saying ICE shouldn't do their job. As I've said, I wished that they were more visible in terms of being law enforcement officers for the federal government, and making sure that there are steps that we all can see that they're picking up people who actually are here illegally. Now, there's those people who are here, they come in on a visa and they remain here. We don't know who they are, and only the federal government tracks those, and it's their job to track them, and they should do their job. But I don't necessarily think that our people should be afraid to call the police. And when that happens, when people are afraid to call the police because Uncle Joe might be in the back room, so that I'm going to let somebody be hurt, I'm going to let somebody commit a crime because I'm not going to call the police. How is that working for us? I don't believe it is. And I do think that we want to have reasonable, good, workable immigration laws that we really do support. I think economically, it's really important to our state. We have a significant population, as I've said, from many, many other parts of the world. And I want those people, many of whom are the best of the best, that come here for education, stay here, work in our tech industry. There isn't a major tech corporation, including the one that I was vice president of, Apple Computer, whose one founder wasn't, here coming as an immigrant.
Representative Walsh, I'm pretty sure I know where you stand, how you vote.
I voted against Keep Washington Working. It's a terrible bill and law. The senator's hypothetical is pretty convoluted there. Let's not talk in obscure hypotheticals about Uncle Joe. Let's talk about fentanyl and the scourge of this illegal drug, which comes across the border, primarily the southern border, but sometimes the northern border, in dose concentrations that are completely crazy. And sometimes so concentrated that physical touch with the stuff can make you sick or kill you. And the previous White House administration's open border policy just allowed this poison to flow into every corner of the country. I mean, Senator Wellman, you need to walk around Pike Place Market. It's a horror show. We need to do better to enforce immigration law and our borders and not create these well-meaning but poorly executed public policy points, whether they're Keep Washington Working or the even screwier executive orders. We need to stop this, and we need to cooperate in a reasonable, lawful, and constitutional way with the federal agencies in charge of enforcing immigration law and protecting our borders. And when they come up with a duly made document, this immigration detainer, like a warrant, like an arrest warrant, and execute it, deliver it to a local police force or a local sheriff, and say, when you find this individual, please hold them and notify us, and we'll come get them and process them out of the country. We need to honor those detainers. And the truth is, if you talk to anyone at ICE and anyone at the federal level, Department of Homeland Security, which is the parent agency above ICE, they don't want to be doing street sweeps. They don't want to be coming and getting Uncle Joe. What they really want is access to our jails and prisons. And they want to focus on detaining and processing and deporting criminals who broke the law to come into this country in this state, or broke the law to stay in this country in this state beyond the term of their visa, and then committed other crimes like homicide, like drug trafficking, like human trafficking, that got them put in our local jails or prisons. We want to let ICE focus on getting those bad actors and deporting those people. That's the market they want to focus on. They only do street sweeps because our policy in the state doesn't let them get into the prisons. Let's let them get into the jails and prisons and focus their enforcement measures, their enforcement actions on criminals.
Attorney General Nick Brown his agency is in charge of making sure that people are following the Keep Washington Working Act. But there also is this balance that has to happen with law enforcement. On one hand, you're trying to enforce the law. I've heard multiple people, not just Sheriff Wagner, other law enforcement agencies, law enforcement personnel throughout our state, try to find the balance of following state law, but also trying to adhere to federal law. They're not sure who to listen to. People in their own communities want them to do different things, even though the law states a certain requirement for them to follow. Senator Wellman, your thoughts on what it's like to be in law enforcement, knowing that this is the law of the land?
Well, I'm not hearing from any of my local communities. I have not heard from them that this is not enabling them to do the job to keep people who are drug runners, to keep people who have hurt other people, who are trafficking other humans. I have not heard any of that. I would also suggest that the next time that we meet, that we have Jim McMahon and perhaps somebody representing the sheriffs and police chiefs in general, because what I have heard is that how many times ICE has been called and didn't come to get somebody. And I do think that if you are here and you have been convicted, I guess the question you might ask is, if you have been convicted of bringing fentanyl into the country, horrible, horrible drug when used illegally, terrific drug for those who know how to use it and use pharmaceutical grade fentanyl, great drug. But otherwise, how should they go to jail in the United States for that crime and then be turned over to ICE, or should they be, I don't know, Representative Wash, I think it's Representative, right? I would like to hear which way you think it should go. Should they serve their time here in the United States and then go, or what? Or just
once again, Senator Woman, you're dealing in hypotheticals that are interesting but not relevant to people's daily concerns.
Well, what were your
it would depend on each case.
It
would depend on the local prosecutor's discretion and perhaps the local sheriff's discretion. We know that Sheriff Wagner, who's had the audio problems here, has taken a bold stand in saying that he will cooperate with federal agencies to enforce immigration law. I know that Sheriff Swank in Pierce County has made similar strong statements, and they're to be applauded for their conviction and following their convictions. Other sheriffs around the state of Washington are in the same place. They're not speaking quite as loudly as those two sheriffs are. And as far as Attorney General Brown suing Sheriff Wagner, Brown should be ashamed of himself. That is a waste of taxpayer money for him to be suing a sheriff who is caught between conflicting points in law at the state level and the federal level, and is doing his best job as an elected law enforcement officer, the top elected law enforcement officer in his county, to find that path between conflicting points in state law and federal law. He's doing what I believe is his job to the best of his judgment and intent. And we have this attorney general in this state who, never saw, a camera he didn't want to jump in front of, trying to sue this sheriff who's caught between a rock and a hard place. The attorney general ought to be helping Sheriff Wagner negotiate a difficult path between conflicts in federal and state law. He shouldn't be suing him, and the attorney general should be ashamed of himself.
Talk a little bit about that. You're facing a lawsuit from A.G. Brown for enforcing federal law. What's that experience been like for you?
Well, the reality is the gentleman on this is exactly right. The only reason that Adams County is being sued, in my view, is I fit the bill. I fit what looks like the southern border. It fits the fight that the people in Washington State want to have with Donald Trump. They've been very vocal about Trump's being the enemy and that they're going to Trump-proof Washington State. Here's the deal with this whole mess. I heard the lady here talking, and she talks about how all these law enforcement come and give her all this advice. I will challenge any one of them. And then the reason I will say that is most of the law enforcement she's talking to are on the side of the ideology that's being pushed, number one. And number two, you're mainly talking to police chiefs and not sheriffs, which is a very distinct difference, because a chief is run by the people that put them there with a hiring of that individual, where the sheriff is elected by their constituents in their counties to uphold all the laws that we can pertaining to the United States Constitution as well as the state constitution. That is why for the last 4 or 5 years, the NGOs that work very closely, and I'm sure they're on both sides, very closely in Washington State with our attorney generals to do this type of thing with Adams County. Adams County is being hit with a lawsuit that's absolutely ridiculous. Our jail has been closed for 3 years. They know this. The individual they're talking about that they have brought this whole thing about to Adams County is a Hispanic male that was arrested for crimes in Adams County. And the NGO wants to take on that case in federal court the same day or around the same day. The Attorney General, who's been working with that NGO to gather information and so on and so forth, to bring it down as an example to the rest of the state sheriffs that Adams County is not complying with Keep Washington Working Act. Now, she's very proud of this act. And it's not that I don't want to keep Washington working, but I'm going to throw this out to her a little bit and anybody else that wants to talk about it. I will guarantee you, you didn't come to Adams County. I can guarantee you that when we talk about keep Washington working, Adams County is. We are not going out in groups and rounding people up with trucks and buses and doing exactly what everybody else is arguing and complaining about. I'm very proud of our Hispanic culture here. I'm very proud of the Hispanic population. But the statistics show, even you can't argue that it's not just Hispanics that are coming over the border. And the fact of the matter is these scare tactics, especially in the state of Washington, that are bringing this crap to everybody and trying to make it seem like this is bigger than it really is. You have not once mentioned the H-2A program from the state of Washington that is very successful in Adams County. Adams County has busloads of people on Walmart on Friday night. I challenge you to come and walk through the Walmart with me in my uniform. They will shake my hands. They won't take off running. The H-2A program works. The problem is everybody thinks on the left that this is a good thing, just like they did 5 years ago with defund the police. This is factual information in my view. This is exactly what happened when they didn't want the funding or the police to do one thing. And I've heard just recently, you know what? What's it going to take? We're going to have another George Floyd situation and all hell will break loose. It's happening. It's what's being pushed. I don't care what anybody says. I'm the sheriff of Adams County. Adams County has a very, very robust immigrant population that we are very proud of, farming, everything. And they're working this last weekend. Think about it. While everybody's marching over there for no kings, which every one of those people probably followed the British King Charles and all his kids, and they're so excited to talk about them. See how many stories on that are listed on the news every day. But yet they'll go out and say no kings to Mr. Trump, who won an election by a pretty good landslide. And then I have labor contractors that I speak to on the daily that tell me, Sheriff, we know most of our people are here and a lot of them illegal. And we tell them, if you don't break the law here, you probably have nothing to worry about. And that has been the case. But instead, we're going to go and look at Chaz or whatever that I call Chaz Seattle now. The reality is that you guys are listening to people in the inner cities that actually aren't trying to keep people working. You'd rather keep them marching.
I want to give Senator Wellman a chance to kind of address that because, I mean, Adams County is very rural. There are a lot of parts of Washington that aren't Seattle or aren't Bellevue, Mercer Island, pick your big metro area, who do agree with Sheriff Adams there. What's your take?
Well, first of all, without knowing me, he doesn't know perhaps that I was 7 years on the Community Economic Revitalization Board for the state of Washington. I'm trying to think if there is a county that I have not visited. And in fact, I am one of the founders of Partners for Rural Washington, which is an economic development for rural communities across the state of Washington. And I care deeply about our state. And I'm also the founder of the state broadband office because until everyone has that kind of connectivity, we're looking at those who have and those who have not. And so I've been very concerned fighting for our rural communities to have everything that they deserve. And I also was told, I guess maybe I'm wrong, but I have been working with an organization that says that they are the organization for sheriffs and police chiefs. So that was the group that we were talking about that I worked with for 3 years to get the bill to neutral, as Representative Walsh says, so that they have said, we keep our word. We are supporting this, not supporting, we are neutral on this bill. We are still neutral on the bill, and we still don't want to see things happen in our state that would make anyone less safe. And so I'm definitely interested. If two things I've heard, first of all, is that there are people that should be picked up because they are criminals, and there's an issue about that, and they're not. And then I would like to look into this issue around the sheriff and what he's being accused of. And I'm not familiar, in all honesty, I'm not familiar with what is happening with him, but I will look into it.
Representative Walsh, I mean, this is the law of the land. It will be, I think, for as long as we have the current political setup in our state. How do you navigate what you do with knowing the way the law is set up?
Well, the Washington State Constitution tells us how to navigate it. The Washington State Constitution recognizes the U.S. Constitution and, by extension, federal law as the highest law of the land. And so we hear from time to time among well-meaning but misinformed people here in Washington that the Constitution bars the president from doing X, or the Constitution limits ICE from doing Y, and they generally have a very poor grasp of what the federal Constitution actually empowers the president or federal agencies to do, and how that body of law interacts with the body of law here in Washington State. It's not just immigration where these things are in tension. There are other points in the law where state law is at tension with federal law. It's not that uncommon, but I guess it's most extreme right now at this point in time on matters of immigration enforcement. The Keep Washington Working Act is a flagrant disregard of federal law. And that was the point of it, really. Okay, that's fine. But it does leave law enforcement officers, and we've heard a little bit from Sheriff Wagner, and I mentioned Sheriff Swank, and there are others, are willing to say that this conflict in the law is putting them, as the terms they use, between a rock and a hard place, and they have to figure out which law to put first, to enforce. And when you read the state constitution, your direction is to treat federal law and the federal constitution as the highest law in the land. So that is what I believe Sheriff Wagner is doing, what Sheriff Swank is doing, and what other sheriffs are doing. And the idea that our state attorney general would use taxpayer resources to prosecute, to sue, to go after these sheriffs is shocking. What the state attorney general should do is help resolve the tension in the law between state and federal law on immigration, not be going around suing law enforcement officers. The sheriff is right to say this compares in a bad way with the defund the police movement of several years ago. It has that corrosive and endangering effect on the good people of this state. Let's not do it. Let's look for places where we can resolve the tension and allow Sheriff Wagner and the other sheriffs to do their jobs.
This is absolutely a conversation that will continue for years to come. And I want to thank both of you and also Sheriff Wagner for being part of this conversation on this town hall regarding sanctuary cities, federal debate. Thank you so much for your insight, your knowledge. Thank you for your civility and for allowing us to have this conversation today.
Thank you.
It's always good to talk to you. Senator Wellman, we will cross swords again on this issue, I'm sure.
I'm sure.